Welcome, dear dreamer, to Whispered Legends, a sanctuary where ancient voices drift like smoke above the fire, and the heartbeat of the drum carries stories through the night. Let the world grow still. Let your breath soften. And let your spirit wander beneath the gold of the savanna sky, through forests that murmur in many tongues, and along rivers that remember the footsteps of gods. Tonight, we journey to the storied heart of West Africa, to Ghana, the land where spirits once walked beside mortals, and the earth itself listens when a tale is told. Here, every story has a life of its own. Some speak through the spider's clever web, others through the call of the leopard, the laughter of children, or the whisper of rain upon the yam fields. These are the old tales, woven in courtyards and marketplaces, told beneath palm fronds and moonlight, carried in song, in rhythm, and in breath. Some glimmer with mischief, others shimmer with wonder or sorrow, but all carry a thread of wisdom, binding the living to those who came before. So rest now, dear listener. Let the hush of the Ghanaian night surround you, and let the stories of this ancient land, the land where gods once walked, unfold softly, one by one.
Story 1. Why the Sky is Far Away. From Ashanti Folk Tales by R.S. Rattray, 1930. In a time long faded into the hush of ancestral memory, when the world breathed in rhythms more ancient than even the oldest drum song, the sky hung low over the land of the Ashanti. It was not the distant vault we know today, but something near, intimate, generous, and close as breath. Its vast blue canopy stretched gently over the earth, pressing down like the comforting hand of a parent, its folds resting softly atop the trees, hills, and dwellings of the people. This sky, called Nyankonpon by the Akan people, was more than distant atmosphere, it was sustenance. A living presence. From its broad, cloud-stippled body, the people drew their nourishment. They did not farm, nor did they fish or hunt. They had no need to till soil, to seek prey through thickets, or to coax seed from ground. Instead, when hunger stirred within them, they simply reached upward. And the sky responded. Its flesh was not like bread, nor meat, nor fruit, yet it held a texture both soft and yielding, like a warm, thick paste, pliant in the hands, satisfying to the tongue. It bore no single flavor. To each person, it tasted as needed, sweet or savory, plain or rich. To the young, it gave sweetness like sugar cane, to the elders, warmth like a bowl of yam porridge. In this age of effortless provision, the people lived in great ease. Life moved gently. Mornings arrived not with toil, but with calm conversation and the rustle of cloth being wrapped about shoulders. Children played beneath low-hanging sky, laughing as they tugged small handfuls from the heavens and shaped them like clay into birds, fruits, and faces. These they ate with glee before running off to chase each other through the shaded courtyards. Women sang as they sat beneath wide eaves, braiding hair or weaving threads, occasionally lifting a hand to break off a sky morsel to share. Men gathered in relaxed circles, carving stools or retelling the oldest tales, their fingers sometimes trailing upward to touch and taste the sky. Yet, as often happens where abundance dwells too long, a quiet forgetfulness began to grow among the people. Where once they had taken only what they needed, they now pulled more. Some shaped the sky not to eat, but for idle amusement. Lids were torn off and tossed aside. Others, distracted by conversational pride, left sky portions half consumed on mats and in pots. At first, these acts were small, unthinking, like the errant drop of water from a leaky calabash. But small things gather. Soon, the earth beneath the village paths began to show signs of waste. Here, a soft piece of discarded sky dried and darkened. There, children abandoned sky mash sculptures in the dust, forgetting them as they ran. The courtyards grew littered with scraps. Meals ended with leftovers strewn about, unwanted and unburied. Then the sky stirred. Its voice was not like thunder, nor wind, nor rain. It was a deep stillness that trembled through the air, soft and solemn, yet firm as stone. People of the earth, it said, you take from me, and I give. Yet you do not cherish what is given. You waste. You discard. If you do not change, I shall go. The voice hung in the air like smoke. It filled the huts, the paths, the spaces between heartbeats. The people were afraid. They gathered. Elders spoke gravely. Children were hushed. Women poured libation and made quiet prayers, their eyes turned skyward. From that day, the villagers took care. They broke off only what was needed. They shared. They gathered leftovers into cooking pots to be warmed again, or passed bits of uneaten sky to the elderly and the poor. For a while, balance returned. Silence again settled between sky and earth. But time, ever circling, wore down memory. The ease returned. One evening, a woman, perhaps tired, perhaps preoccupied, reached up for sky to prepare her meal. She took more than needed. When she finished, a large lump remained. Rather than storing it or offering it to a neighbor, she stepped outside her doorway and tossed it away. The sky paste fell with a soft, wet sound into the pile of refuse nearby, joining other scraps, unnoticed and unwanted. That night, a change passed through the world. It began not with storm or fire, but with a subtle shift in air. A quiet breeze stirred the tops of the trees, though no leaves rustled. The birds fell silent. The crickets paused. Then the sky's voice returned, calm, final, and full of sorrow. You were warned. And with those words, the great sky began to rise. Slowly, with the grace of something immense and grieving, it lifted from the earth. It peeled itself from the rooftops, from the palm trees, from the ridges of the hills. It ascended without haste, but with purpose. Up, up, beyond reach, beyond ladders, beyond spears and climbing limbs. People ran from their huts, gazing upward. They raised their arms. They cried out. Some leapt, trying to grasp the retreating sky. Others offered prayers, begged forgiveness, promised to be better. But the sky did not pause. Higher it rose, until it no longer brushed the treetops. Higher still, until it blurred into the place of birds and clouds. At last, it took its place in the far-off heavens, where only the tallest mountains could dream to gaze upon it. And so it has remained. No longer could people eat from it. No longer could a hand reach up and draw down food with ease. The days of effortless nourishment were ended. From that time on, The people had to learn to cultivate the ground. They began to dig and plant, to tend yams and millet, to store maize and dry cassava. They learned to fish the rivers and hunt the forests. They came to know the cycle of seasons, the fatigue of labor, the pride of harvest. And in the evenings, when the work was done, they would look upward to the vast blue sky, distant now, unreachable, and remember what once was. They remembered the gift and the loss. They taught their children, and their children's children, to be mindful of waste, to take only what was needed, to give thanks. And in their proverbs and their songs, in their quiet moments and festive dances, they carried the story. Why is the sky far away? Because once, it was near. And because the people forgot to treasure what they had been freely given. Story 2, Ananse and Her Talking Yam. Origin, Akan, Ashanti, from oral tradition recorded in mid-20th century Ghanaian school readers and folk anthologies. In the hush of early evening, when the sun has melted into the red dust and the trees hum low with stories not yet spoken, the voice of the ancestors returns. It drifts gently across woven courtyards and thatched roofs, curling like smoke through memory. Tonight, the tale it brings is of Ananse, the trickster spider of sly wit and quick legs, and of a yam that, in its quiet way, demanded to be heard. Long ago, when the earth still held stories in her skin and the wind lingered to listen, Ananse wandered down a quiet footpath, lined with rustling leaves and the scent of ripened fruit. He had eaten that morning, but hunger was not what moved him. Ananse's heart was restless, ever prowling for a new game to play or a new thing to claim. His path turned beside a farmer's field, one he knew but rarely entered. It was a small place, fringed with yam vines that curled like dancers across the low red earth. From the shade of a broad-leaved plant, something golden caught his eye. A yam. Large, round, and whole, nestled neatly atop the soil, as if waiting. Ananse leaned close. The yam's skin was smooth, just kissed with dust. He tilted his head, and reached to pull it free. And then, a voice. Ananse. His hand stopped. His limbs, light as twigs, stiffened in surprise. The voice was soft, almost like a sigh in the earth. Ananse, you must bury me in your garden, it said. If you do not, trouble will come to you. Now, it is not every day a yam speaks. And it is even rarer for a trickster to be caught unready. But Ananse, sharp though he was, could only blink. Still, he was not without courage. He picked up the yam with great care, holding it in two legs as if cradling a secret. Without speaking, he turned from the path and walked slowly home. Ananse's garden lay behind his compound, just beyond a ring of low trees where the soil was warm and the air held the smell of ash and wild herbs. There, he dug a small hollow with his hands. He laid the yam gently in the earth and covered it with soft, black soil. Around it he placed 3 smooth stones, gifts from the river's edge. Then, from gathered fronds and peeled bark, he built a little shelter, enough to shield him from the night's breath. He folded himself there, crouched like a shadow, and waited. The moon rose and climbed. Frogs began their song. Somewhere in the darkness, an owl cried once and fell silent. But the yam made no sound. Ananse did not sleep. When dawn finally spread her fingers across the sky, pale and tender, Ananse stood. He uncovered the yam. No voice came. He frowned. "If you speak once, surely you can speak again," he said aloud, with a trace of annoyance. He reburied the yam and went about his day, but something within him remained curious, uneasy. 3 days passed. Rain fell once, a light drizzle that scattered the leaves. Ananse, busy with idle schemes and half-planned tricks, stayed away. But on the 4th day, his steps brought him again to the garden. He knelt, brushed the soil aside, and looked closely. The yam trembled, just slightly, and spoke. "Ananse, you have returned. I ask again, plant me well, watch over me, or you will find misfortune at your door." There was no scolding in the voice, only the weight of a promise. Ananse did not reply right away. He looked at the yam, then at his own hands. Slowly, he dug a wider bed. He crumbled in fresh earth from the corner of his garden. He brought water from the clay jar and poured it gently. Then he built a second shelter, taller, stronger. And this time, he stayed. The night crept over them, slower than before. In the shelter, Ananse listened. His ears twitched at every sigh of wind. His legs ached, but he did not shift. The air grew cooler. Hours passed. The yam said nothing. Not even a murmur. Ananse stayed until the stars began to pale. In the morning, he leaned close. Then, at last, the yam spoke again. "You have buried me. You have given care. But speak kindly as well, Ananse, or your cleverness will not save you." The words were soft, almost mournful. Ananse said nothing more. He bowed low before the yam. From that day forward, he tended the small garden with unusual care. He weeded it gently, and when he passed by, he always greeted the earth with a soft whisper. "Good morning, wise one," he would say, even when others were near. Time passed. The yam grew strong. And Ananse, though still clever, grew quieter. He still told stories, still played tricks, but never with wastefulness. And never again did he take what was not his to take. The yam never spoke again. But its silence held more meaning than any tale Ananse could tell. And so the garden remained, a quiet place where lessons rooted deep and grew tall. Some say that even now, if you pass by a well-kept garden in the Ashanti land, and the wind is just right, you might hear the whisper of a yam that once spoke truth to a spider. And if you listen well, you too may learn that the cleverest among us are those who remember to listen, to care, and to speak gently to the world. Story 3, The Hunter and the Tortoise. Origin, Gold Coast, modern Ghana, from W. H. Barker and Cecilia Sinclair, West African Folk Tales, 1917. In the hush of late afternoon, when the day was lowering toward evening and the forest began to breathe more slowly, a hunter walked farther than he had planned. The sky's light had softened to a deep, amber gold, and the trunks of tall trees glowed faintly, their bark warm under the touch of the sun's last strength. The air held the scent of dry leaves and distant water, and the hunter's steps fell quieter on the earth as the bush gathered itself into evening stillness. He was alone on a narrow path, the ground dappled with shifting shadows. Somewhere high above, a bird gave a final call before roosting, and far away came the muted crack of a branch in the wind. Then, clear against the woven murmur of the forest, came a sound unlike any he had heard before. It was not the cry of bird or beast. It was music, small, bright, and deliberate, the voice of a harp, no larger than a man's two hands. And over the strings, in a tone that was steady and unhurried, there came words. It is man who forces himself on things, not things which force themselves on him. The hunter stopped where he stood. The sound was so strange, so unexpected, that he did not move for some time, fearing the smallest rustle might break it. The tune was simple, but it carried a quiet strength. Each note hung in the air, then drifted away like a leaf in slow water. The words settled in his mind, heavy and light all at once, as if they were both a warning and a truth too large to see all at once. When the last thread of music faded, he stepped forward carefully, pushing aside the low branches. There, in a clearing no bigger than a hut's shadow, sat a tortoise. Her shell caught the golden light in deep brown and amber curves, and before her was the harp. Her small feet were still. Her head was lifted slightly, the way a singer lifts it to let sound travel farther. The hunter said nothing. He did not step forward to touch her. Instead, he stood for a while, the air between them full of the echo of the song. When at last she lowered her head, the harp quiet against her breast, he turned away and retraced his steps home. The next day, when the sun was again leaning toward its rest, the hunter returned. And the day after that, and the day after still. Always he found her in that same patch of dappled light, the little harp resting against her shell, the song rising. It is man who forces himself on things, not things which force themselves on him. He learned the rise and fall of the melody, how the first line carried itself forward and the second settled firmly, like a stone placed just so. The words began to live in him. On his walks home, they would play in his mind with the same unhurried rhythm the tortoise gave them. He found that he waited each day for the hour when he could hear them again. After many such visits, the hunter's longing grew. He began to wish the song could be nearer, a part of his daily life, there to greet him when he woke and to ease him when the day's work was done. At last, he spoke his wish aloud to the tortoise. She listened, her small dark eyes still. When she answered, her voice was even. She would go with him if he wished, but only if she would sing for him alone. No one else must hear her song. The hunter agreed at once. He lifted her gently, the harp as well, and carried them both along the winding path back to his home. In his hut he made a resting place for her, close enough that he could hear the strings without strain. and in the mornings and evenings, she would sing the same steady lines, the harp's voice bright under her own. The hunter felt himself blessed. His home seemed warmer, the days shorter, the evenings more content. But as the days passed, another feeling began to grow. The music was not only a comfort, it was a wonder. And wonders, the hunter thought, were meant to be shown. It began as a passing idea, no more than a shadow crossing the ground, but slowly it took shape and stayed. He told one person. He told another. The story of the tortoise with her harp moved from mouth to mouth, until at last it reached the chief himself. The chief sent for the hunter and told him to bring this marvel before the assembly, so all the people might see and hear. Before the gathered crowd, the hunter told his story. He spoke of the tortoise, of her harp, of the song she played and the words she sang. The people laughed, calling it foolish talk. But the hunter stood firm. If he had not spoken truth, he said, they could kill him, but if the tortoise did as he claimed, he might punish them as he wished. The chief agreed, and the meeting was set for the next day. At dawn, the hunter lifted the tortoise from her resting place, took up the harp, and walked to the assembly place. A table had been set at the center, bare and waiting. The people formed a wide ring, their faces turned toward him as he set the tortoise and her harp upon the wood. The air held its breath. The hunter asked her to sing. She was silent. He coaxed her, softly at first, then with greater urgency. Still she did not sing. The harp remained still, the strings unmoved. The people began to murmur. Their voices grew sharper. Some shook their heads. Others called out that he had lied. The hunter tried again and again, his words growing tight, his heart heavy in his chest. But the tortoise only watched him in silence. The sun climbed high, then began to fall. By the time its light stretched long across the ground, the assembly had reached its judgment. The agreement was kept. The hunter was executed. And in the stillness that followed, the tortoise spoke. Her voice was as clear as it had been in the forest, the harp resting untouched before her. She said the hunter had brought this upon himself. She had been content in her own place, singing her song without troubling anyone. If he had been content to come and listen, she would have gone on singing for him there. But he had not been content. He had forced himself upon something that had not forced itself upon him. And she ended as she had always ended. It is man who forces himself on things, not things which force themselves on him. The people said nothing. The evening wind came and passed, lifting the last sound of her voice into the dark. When they looked again, the tortoise and her harp were gone.
Story 4. The Leopard and the Ram. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, Told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. Evening was moving gently through the trees, drawing the light down into a warm hush, when a ram came to a tract of bush and made up his mind. He would clear a space there, cut the small trees, lift the tangle of creepers, pile the brushwood in neat heaps, and build himself a house. The ground felt good under hoof, the air smelled of sap and clean bark. It was a quiet, sensible thought that filled his chest like a steady breath. He walked the plot slowly, choosing where a doorway might face the breeze, where a hearth could sit out of the wind. Then he began. With patient strokes he opened the clearing. Leaves turned over with their pale backs showing, stems fell with soft cracks, the day settled around his work. When the light lowered, he went home, pleased and tired, and the little square of earth lay waiting for morning. Not long after, a leopard who lived not far away also came to that very place. His paws were silent in the leaf fall, his eyes bright against the green shade. He, too, had come with the same intention. A home here, where the ground was dry and the trees old enough to shelter. Good. He stood a moment, measuring the space with his gaze, and then saw that the undergrowth was not as dense as it should have been. Someone had cleared here already. He looked right and left, pricking his ears. The path held no scent he knew, the bush kept its counsel. The fairies have been at work, he thought, and gratitude stirred in him like a nod. He set to the task, cutting, treading the earth flat, smoothing the lines where a wall might stand. So it went. One day ram came and worked, another day leopard came and worked. Neither saw the other. Each, returning in turn, found some portion already done and, after a moment of surprise, thanked the unseen helpers and continued. Day folded over day, and the two sets of tracks, cloven and padded, laced the same stretch of earth without crossing. A square took shape. Posts were set. A roof spread itself like the open hand of a great palm. The clearing became a house, and the house grew steady and right, as if it had always been meant to stand there. At last, when the dwelling was finished to the satisfaction of both, they arrived on the same day. Across the doorway they met. They stopped, astonished, then laughed softly together, for the matter was plain, the fairies were not spirits at all, but a neighbor. They told their tales, how the one had begun, how the other had continued, how each had found the work farther along than he had left it. There was no anger, only a shared satisfaction. They decided simply, they would live together in the house they had both raised. It is quiet work to settle a new home. They arranged a sleeping place on one side and another on the other. They made the cooking place neat. They set their few things where hands might reach them easily. In the mild mornings and cooler evenings, the house breathed like a third creature, content with its two keepers. Both leopard and ram had sons. While their fathers were away hunting, the two young ones played in the cleared yard or along the edge of the path. They chased each other around the corner posts, practiced small leaps, pushed pebbles with their toes, and laughed in the language of animals, pure movement and quick bright breath. Leopard noticed something puzzling. Ram, who had neither claws nor teeth for tearing, came home each evening with meat, fine pieces, as good as his own. Night after night Leopard wondered. At last, before setting out one morning, he called his son close and said, "Find out how your friend's father hunts. And tell me." That day, during play, young Leopard asked. Young Ram would only tell if Leopard shared his father's method too. A fair bargain. They cut 2 plantain stems in the bush. Leopard's son placed his upright, circled like his father, rose on his hind legs, gathered himself, then sprang and tore the stem in 2. Ram's son set his stem, stepped back just a pace, then ran forward hard with his head lowered, smashing it to pieces. He warned, "You must be careful when you see a ram go backward." Leopard stored the words away. Days passed. Rain came, a steady, soaking rain. The packed earth floor grew slick, smelling of cool clay. Leopard invited Ram to dine. Ram crossed the room, hooves tapping softly. Then his hoof slid, and he stepped backward to catch his balance. In that instant, the warning leapt into Leopard's mind. He did not see the slip, only the backward step. His muscles coiled, fear burst through thought. With a cry to his son, he sprang over the wall. The boy scrambled after him. Together they vanished into the wet green of the bush. Ram called after them, puzzled, but the forest swallowed his voice. The rain softened to a whisper on the leaves, and the house stood quiet, with the doorway open and the air smelling of damp earth. From that day, leopards have slept in the forest, and rams have stayed at home. And so it remains, season after season, as steady as the path of the sun, each in their place, each in their way. Story 5. How Ananse became the owner of all stories. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by R.S. Rattray in Ashanti, 1916. Long ago, when the world was still bright with first beginnings, the stories of the earth did not belong to the people. They were treasures kept far above, hidden in the keeping of Nyame, the great sky god. His dwelling was high and distant, beyond clouds heavy with rain, and within it he guarded the tales of wisdom, laughter, and memory. They were like beads strung on a cord, like seeds gathered in a calabash, shining, precious, beyond reach. On earth, men and women told fragments of tales, broken echoes of the truth. But Ananse, the small spider, was restless. He longed for the whole treasure, for every story. He wished to carry them down to earth, so that people might gather beneath the evening trees and listen as wisdom and wonder were woven into words. And so, he made up his mind. He would climb to Nyame, and he would ask for the stories. With patient legs he spun a shining line of silk, strong as rope, and climbed. Higher and higher he rose, past the flight of birds and into the drifting folds of cloud. The air grew thin, the world below grew faint. At last he came to the dwelling of Nyame, where the air trembled with majesty and the sky itself seemed to hold its breath. Nyame gazed upon him, vast as thunder. His voice rolled like storm clouds. "Ananse, what brings you here?" And Ananse, bowing low, answered, "Great Nyame, sky god, I have come for the stories. I wish that they may belong to me, that I may carry them to earth and share them among the people." At this, Nyame laughed, the sound booming across the heavens. You, a spider so small, daring to claim my stories? Many greater than you have come, yet they failed. His eyes flashed like lightning. If you want the stories, you must pay my price. Ananse lifted his head. Tell me your price, O Nyame. Nyame leaned close, and the sky darkened with his words. Bring me 4 things, Onini the python, whose body is longer than the palm tree, Osebo the leopard, fierce and sharp-toothed, Mybrow, the swarm of hornets whose sting burns like fire, and Moesha, the fairy whom no one can catch. Bring me these, and the stories shall be yours. Ananse bowed once more. His heart trembled, for the task was great, yet within that trembling there was also a spark of joy, for these were challenges that called for cunning, and cunning was his gift. He spun his line and descended once more to earth. He began with Onini the python. At the river's edge, where the water slid smooth and green, the python lay coiled, his scales gleaming. Ananse greeted him politely. Onini, I have heard men say you are not so long as the palm tree. They doubt your greatness. The python hissed in anger. It is not true. I am longer. Well then, said Ananse, let us measure, so all may know. He laid a long bamboo pole beside the palm tree. Proudly Onini stretched himself full length beside it. In that moment Ananse seized his chance. Quick as thought, he tied the python fast with rope, from head to tail. Onini writhed and thrashed, but the cords only tightened. Ananse smiled. Now you shall be my gift to Nyame. Next, he sought Osebo the leopard. In the forest he dug a pit, deep and wide, covering it with branches and leaves. In the night Osebo came prowling and fell in with a crash. At dawn Ananse drew near. Osebo, mighty one, he called, what has befallen you? Ananse, roared the leopard, bring me a branch so I may climb out. Ananse lowered a branch, but tied it halfway down. Osebo grasped it, climbing, and at once Ananse bound him tight, legs close, teeth snapping in vain. You too will go to Nyame, Ananse whispered. Then he turned to Mybrow, the hornets. He filled a gourd with water and smeared gum round its mouth. With broad plantain leaves he shaped a covering. Then he poured water over his head and body, until it dripped from his hair and legs. He ran to the tree where the hornets swarmed and cried aloud, Alas! The rains are falling. Come, Mybrow, hide in this gourd, and you will be safe from the storm. Hearing this, the hornets believed the wet season had broken. They swarmed inside the gourd. At once Ananse sealed it fast. Their buzzing shook the vessel, fierce and angry, but they could not escape. Last came Moesha, the fairy. This was the hardest of all. Ananse carved a little doll from wood, covered it with sticky gum, and dressed it as if alive, with beads and a cloth. He set a bowl of sweet yam before it and hid nearby. Soon Moesha appeared, small and beautiful, drawn by the smell of the food. She greeted the doll. Good day, child. May I taste your yam? The doll said nothing. Are you too proud to answer me? She cried. Still silence. Her anger rose. She struck the doll across the face, and her hand stuck fast. In fury she struck again, and the other hand clung. She kicked, her feet stuck. She butted her head, It too was held. She struggled, but the gum held her tight. Ananse leapt from hiding. Moesha, you are caught. You shall go to Nyame with the others. So it was that Ananse gathered all four, Onini the python, Osebo the leopard, Mybrow the hornets, and Moesha the fairy. He spun his shining thread and climbed once more to the sky. Nyame beheld him and was astonished. There they were, bound and helpless, the four no one had thought could ever be caught. The sky god laughed, rolling like thunder breaking open the heavens. Ananse, you, so small, have done what no one greater could do. From this day, the stories are yours. They shall be called Anancesum, tales of the spider. Take them to earth, and let all people hear. And so Ananse descended, bearing the treasure of tales. He called the people together under the wide tree, and he began to speak. The stories spilled out, bright as beads, shining as threads of silk. They brought laughter, and they brought wisdom. The people listened, and their hearts were filled. From that time until this, when stories are told among the Ashanti and beyond, they are called Anancesum. For it was Ananse, with his small body and his great cunning, who won them from the sky god, and who gave them to the world. Story 6. How Beasts and Serpents First Came into the World. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. There was a day when the road through the bush seemed to run not only between villages but also between the seen and the half-seen. On such a day Kweku Tsin walked, steady of step and quiet in thought. He was not an animal like his father, Ananse the spider. In the old stories he is told as Ananse's son, a boy, a human child, with hands and feet like any other, though his journeys often led him into places where the ordinary world thins and wonder begins. The path carried him farther than usual. The trees leaned together and made a green roof. Birds shifted from branch to branch. The air was warm and smelled of leaf and dust. In that hush he came upon a curious sight. A hole in the ground, not wide, but with a breath that felt like shade drawing upon shade. Kweku Tsin bent, peered, and understood little, only that the hole invited. He slipped through and rose on the other side to find himself in a town where silence had taken up residence. Houses stood in a neat row, doors true, roofs sound. Yet there were no voices, no pestles striking mortar, no laughter of children running a game. The streets were swept clean, and still it seemed the wind itself had forgotten the way there. He walked along slowly, listening. In one house he saw an old woman sitting. She was composed, as if she had long been waiting, and her eyes were grave and knowing. Kweku Tsin greeted her with proper courtesy. She answered him, and in her voice was calm instruction, as simple as a path and as exact as a measuring cord. She told him to go into the garden and listen carefully among the yam mounds. There, if he truly listened, he would hear a yam speak. He was to take the one that said, "Do not dig me out." Then he must peel that yam, throw away the flesh, and set only the rind upon the fire. As it boiled, she said, it would become yam to eat. Kwofi bowed his head to her words, for they were not the kind that asked to be argued with. He went out to the garden, where the earth lay well mounded and the leaves were broad, and he stood still until his breath matched the quiet of the place. The afternoon had a soft weight to it, and the world seemed made entirely of listening. From the rose came a faint voice, one root speaking above the rest. "Do not dig me out." Kwofi marked that hill, loosened the soil with care, and lifted the yam. He peeled it, the rind curling in his hands. He did not taste the flesh. He threw the white body away as he had been told and put the peel in the pot. Soon the steam rose, and from the rind there came yam, good, clean food that satisfied hunger as surely as any harvest. When he had eaten, the old woman spoke again. There were drums, she said, and he must choose one. He was to listen for the right voice, not the drum that said dong dong, but the one that said ding ding. It was a simple difference, yet the kind on which much depends. Kwofi went and stood where the drums were. He laid his hand on one and then another, patient and attentive. He heard the heavy tone of dong dong, round and alluring. He heard, too, the clear answering ding ding, like a bird's call across water. He took the drum that spoke ding ding and brought it back. Later, when he returned to his own people and beat that drum, food came forth in abundance, as if the hollow of the wood were a doorway and the doorway opened onto plenty. Dishes spread out before the folk, and hunger, that thin presence that makes itself felt in the eyes and in the slowness of the hands, retreated. There was gratitude for Kwofi, but beneath the gratitude something steadier, the recognition that obedience, when given to a true word, bears quiet fruit. News travels faster than a shout when it is a marvel. It was not long before Ananse heard. He listened to the talk with bright eyes, eyes that flicker between admiration and the itch to match or better another's deed. Cunning was his portion, and he trusted it more than he trusted patience. If Kwofi had found a hidden town through a hole in the earth, then Ananse would find it too. If Kwofi had received instruction, then Ananse would hear it and make more of it than the first hearer had done. He set off. The path did not resist him. He too came to the hole. He too slipped through and found the quiet town waiting, the air measured, the doors untroubled, the rooms neat and expectant. The old woman was there as before, seated with the same composed gravity. She spoke to him the same counsel she had given Kwofi. He was to go into the garden, listen, and take the yam that begged not to be taken. He was to peel it, throw away the flesh, and boil only the rind, which, at the boil, would become yam. He was to choose a drum by its speech, ding ding, not dong dong. Ananse listened, or seemed to. But listening is not the same as hearing, and hearing is not the same as obeying. He went to the garden where the mounds rose like small brown waves, and the leaves moved very slightly in the warm air. He pulled at the yams impatiently, not waiting for the quiet that lets a thing speak. He wanted the pleasure of eating and the speed of the result more than the care of following. He took what he pleased. He cooked and ate in the old woman's presence, though the manner of the meal required a respect he did not pay. So much for the first instruction. Then he turned to the second. He went to the drums and stood among them, but instead of keeping the old woman's rule, he reached for the one whose voice was grand and heavy. Dong Dong filled the ear with a round promise, and Ananse's heart, that liked the sound of big things, settled on it at once. He brought the Dong Dong drum away with satisfaction rising in him like a tide. Ananse returned to his people with the confidence of one arriving on the crest of a story already half told. A gathering formed gladly, for they remembered Kwekutsin's visit and the food that followed his drum. Faces came close. Children sat in the shadow of their mother's knees. The elders leaned forward, their hands quiet on their staffs. Ananse stood at the center, set his feet, and lifted his hands. He beat upon the drum. What came was not food. From the mouth of the drum there rushed out beasts and serpents, as if the dark within had been a cave full of wildness and the beating of the skin had flung open the gate. The creatures poured forth, fierce and many. Scales flashed, coils slid, claws struck, teeth shone wet. The people cried out and scattered. The dust went up under the running of feet. Ananse himself leapt aside and ran, weaving between bodies and doorways, his pride dissolving in fear. The creatures swarmed and spilled, and where there had been a circle of neighbors expecting a meal, there was a confusion of danger, a turmoil like the bush stirred by a storm. That is how it was told, that through Ananse's choosing of the Dong Dong drum, the beasts and the serpents first came into the world. From that time they were abroad, belonging to the forest and the grass and the edges of paths, woven into the country as much as any tree or stone. The people learned their ways thereafter, how to be watchful near the tall weeds, how to read the marks of claw and coil, how to keep a clean yard and a fire that burns well at evening. As for the ding-ding drum, Kwekutsin kept it and used it with steadiness. It was a provision, not a show. When need came, he beat upon it, and the food that appeared filled bowls without fuss. There was no shouting of miracles, only the sound of satisfaction, wooden spoons on wood, soft talk rising and falling like a windless tide. The old woman's instructions continued to breathe through the days. Listen before acting. Take the thing that forbids itself when the rule commands you to. Keep the part that is easily despised and throw away the tempting part when wisdom says so. Choose the clear tone, not the heavy one. People remembered Ananse too, not to praise, but to mark the path that turns off from wisdom. They spoke his name as a measure of what cleverness becomes when it refuses obedience. Children heard the tale and learned without being told directly, that hurried hands, greedy eyes, and a heart that wants to be seen will carry danger into the open like a drum that beats the wrong call. If you sit in the evening and the fire is a small red boat in the round sea of a courtyard, you can feel why the story endures. It is not a loud lesson, only a quiet dividing of the world. On one side the garden, where a man waits long enough to hear a yam say, "Do not dig me out," and obeys. On the other side the same garden, where the hands go fast and the ears are for one's own hunger. On one side a drum whose light voice answers the old woman's word, on the other a drum whose heavy voice pleases pride. From the second choice, beasts and serpents. From the first, enough food for a circle of neighbors. So the tale is told without hurry and without embellishment. Kwekutsin found the hole and passed through. He met the old woman and received her clear instructions. He kept them and prospered. Ananse followed, held the same wisdom in his hands, let it run through his fingers, and loosed trouble into the world. The town beyond the hole remained as it was, quiet, doors straight, an old woman seated, the garden waiting for a patient ear. And the earth we know remained as it is too, with creatures in the bush and provision at the hearth, depending on which drum a person chooses to beat. From then until now, when elders say this title, How Beasts and Serpents First Came into the World, listeners lean a little closer. They know it is not a tale about strangeness only, but a tale about listening, and about the strict kindness of a rule that seems small yet holds back a flood. They know it is a tale that keeps watch at the gate between hunger and plenty, between pride and safety, and that it asks nothing more of a person than ears to hear and hands willing to do exactly as they are told. Story 7. Adzanumee and Her Mother. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. There once lived a woman whose days were shadowed by a single longing. She worked as others worked, she greeted neighbors, she drew water, she shared in the village feasts. Yet even when food was plentiful and music uncoiled softly into the night, her heart uttered the same, quiet wish. If only she had a daughter to share it with her. The desire followed her like a second breath. It rose at dawn with the smoke from the cooking fire, it sat beside her at the market, it drifted like a thought wisp through the happiest hours. One day she went to the fields to gather yams. The air was still and warm, the earth dark where it had been turned, the leaves broad and waxed with light. She bent to her work, loosening the soil, lifting roots one by one. Then, from the mounded earth, her hands drew out a yam, straight, well-shaped, and pleasing to the eye. The sight of it pressed against her old ache, and the words formed of their own accord. If only this fine yam were a daughter, how happy I should be. To her astonishment, the yam answered. Its voice was plain and clear, not loud, but full enough to steady the moment. If I were to become your daughter, would you promise never to reproach me with having been a yam? The woman, trembling with sudden hope, hastened to give her promise. She promised with all the eagerness of a heart that has waited too long and feared too much that waiting would be forever. At once, the yam changed. Before her stood a beautiful, well-made girl, and with the wonder of it the woman's sorrow lifted like a pot lid from a boiling pan, letting sweetness into the air. She gathered the girl into her arms and named her Adzanumee. From that day the house grew roomy with joy. The girl's hands were quick and steady, she rose in the mornings to make bread, she went to the field to gather yams, she wrapped wares neatly and sold them at the marketplace. The mother watched her with the quiet, astonished gratitude of one who had thought herself forever alone and found, instead, a companion whose presence warmed every corner of the day. Seasons turned. In the dust-gold afternoons, Adzanumee's laughter joined the small talks of neighbors. In the cool blue evenings she moved about the hearth with sure grace. When she walked to market, her step was even and her eye bright. At the stall she measured fairly, counted carefully, and greeted others with the soft courtesy that draws people near without noise. News of her goodness was not shouted, but it was known. It traveled the way scent travels, light, sure, unmistakable. Then there came a day when she was detained longer than usual. Perhaps a customer lingered, or a path was blocked, or a small rain pinned people beneath the eaves until it passed. No one can say, for the tale does not. What it does tell is that Adzanumee's return was delayed, and in the delay her mother's restlessness grew. The sun lowered, the yard lengthened into shade, the door remained open to a doorway without a step in it. Worry pricked and pricked until, in impatience, the woman's tongue outran her promise. "Where can Adzanumee be?" she cried. "She does not deserve that beautiful name. She is only a yam." A bird, singing nearby, heard those words. He cocked his head, he set them to a tune, he took wing and flew to where Adzanumee sat beneath a tree, perhaps resting between errands, perhaps lifting her basket to go. There, in a voice that carried like a clear bell, he sang, "Adzanumee, Adzanumee, your mother is unkind. She says you are only a yam. You do not deserve your name. Adzanumee, Adzanumee." The song fell into Adzanumee's ears and reached the promise that had first called her into the world. She rose and returned home, weeping. The path she had walked 100 times now seemed made of sorrow. The shadows of the leaves looked like thoughts she could not lift out of her mind. When she came to her mother, the woman ran to meet her, hands outstretched, the first strike of fear already turning in her chest. my daughter, what is the matter?" Adzanumee answered in a voice that carried her grief like water carries a reflection, softly, wholly, without breaking it. "Oh, my mother, you have reproached me with being a yam. You said I did not deserve my name. Oh, my mother. Having said this, she turned toward the yam field. The mother, filled with fear, followed after, wailing, "Nay, Adzanumee, Adzanumee. Do not believe it, do not believe it. You are my daughter, my dear daughter. Adzanumee." But sorrow, once unstopped, has its own pace, and a broken promise has its own weight. Adzanumee walked on, singing her sad little song, and the mother's cry, though true now, could not outrun the earlier word that had loosed the hurt into the world. They came to the field. The mounds lay quiet as always, the leaves made their usual soft sounds, the air was as it had been on the day of the miracle. But what a place yields once in joy it can yield again in grief. There, as the mother watched, her daughter quickly changed back into a yam. The woman reached for her, too late. She called, pleaded, tried every tender word she knew, but words, to heal, must keep faith with themselves. She lifted the yam from the ground and held it, as if warmth might coax the shape of her child back from within the smooth skin. Nothing she could do or say would give her back the daughter she had desired so earnestly and treated so inconsiderately. And so the story ends, quiet but lasting. A promise once broken cannot easily be mended, and words spoken in haste may weigh more than we wish. From that day onward, people remembered Adzanumee not only for her beauty and her usefulness, but also for the sorrow that came when her mother forgot her vow. Even now, when the tale is told by firelight, listeners sit in silence at the end, thoughtful and still, reminded that love and longing are strongest when guarded by patience, and that a single careless word can undo what the heart has most desired. Story 8. To lose an elephant for the sake of a wren is a very foolish thing to do. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. In the olden times there stood, in the king's own town, a tree of such size and stature that it altered the very light of day. Its crown spread wide like a great green roof. Its shade lay far out upon the fields where people hoed and sowed. In the mornings its shadow reached over the ridges and sat there like a second dawn. By afternoon it cooled the soil so completely that the crops seemed to grow in a perpetual evening. It was a handsome tree, yes, but it had begun to overstep itself, throwing its cool hand too far across the neighboring farms. The king considered this and gave a decision: the tree must be cut down. He caused his heralds to walk the streets and pass along the paths, crying the king's word so that even the farthest compounds would hear. The proclamation was as clear as a well-struck drum. Any person who could fell the tree with a wooden axe should receive an elephant in reward. The promise was large, and the condition was strict. In every courtyard there was talk, and in every talk there was doubt. A wooden axe? Men shook their heads and smiled. Some laughed outright. They knew what wood does to wood. It dents, it dulls, it bruises the bark but cannot bite. It is impossible, people said. This is a riddle hung on a hook. Better leave it alone. So the great tree still stood, its long shadow lying like a long thought across the farms, and the king's proclamation blew back and forth like a cloth on a line that no one takes down. But in that same town lived Spider. He was small, his body light as a leaf, his legs quick, his mind quicker. Where others measured the strength of muscle and gave up, Spider measured the gap in a rule and began. He did not laugh at the king's word, he smiled into it. He went to the palace, bowed in the proper way, and said that he was ready to rid the town of the troublesome tree. The king was not rash. He had the condition put plainly into Spider's face: a wooden axe, and nothing else. To ensure it, he sent along a servant, a watchful lad, keen-eyed and dutiful, charged to keep the axe in sight and see that Spider used no other tool. The two set out, Spider carrying the wooden axe, the servant keeping pace at his side, the hot day stretching before them to where the huge trunk rose out of the earth like the base of a hill. Spider stood beneath the tree and laid his palm upon the bark as if listening with his hand. The wood was old and hard. It held the memory of long rains and long suns. With the servant standing near, Spider lifted the wooden axe and brought it down. The blow sounded dull, as if a gourd had been struck by a fist. He lifted and struck again. Dull, dull, dull. A few flakes of outer bark came away and lay at his feet like tired scales. This was what the town had expected. The display of a foolish attempt. But Spider had not come with folly for company. He had come with cunning, hidden where the king's eye could not see. Deep in his bag he had placed another axe, its haft short and its blade of steel, bright and sharp as a new thought. The king's rule had named the tool to be used. Spider's mind had already set about moving the rule aside without stepping outside it. He worked a little, then paused, breathing as if from effort. "Ah," he said suddenly, pointing past the servant's shoulder. "Do you see, there, just beyond that brush? A fine antelope. If you are quick, you can hit it with a stone. Run." The servant started, turned, and looked. He saw only the hot air lying flat on the field. "Where?" he asked, eyes scanning the grass. "There," cried Spider, "there, hurry." The boy did as he was bid and ran a long way, searching, and saw nothing but the road waver. While the servant ran, Spider drew the hidden axe from his bag. It flashed once in the sun, then fell. The bite of steel into the trunk was a true sound, bright and sure. He cut swiftly, deeply, then hid the axe again and stood, wooden axe in hand, breathing as a tired worker breathes. Back came the servant, disappointed and a little ashamed. "I could not find it," he said. "Strange," said Spider mildly. "Well then, we must do our work." He struck with the wooden axe. Tap, tap, nothing much. Then, with a little frown, laid it down to rub his arms. "Ah," he cried again, and pointed. "There it is, the antelope, now on the other side. You must be quick this time." Off ran the boy again, dutiful and eager. Again, nothing. Again, in that absence, the steel sang against the tree, making a tidy wound where the wood had been unmarked a moment before. So it went, trick upon trick, absence upon absence. Each time the servant ran, Spider gave the tree a clean deep mouthful of cut. Each time the servant returned, Spider stood quiet with the wooden axe in hand, the mark upon the trunk explained by nothing but patient wooden blows. The daylight turned in the sky. Chips of fresh pale wood lay like flower petals around Spider's feet. Within the trunk a crack began to speak in a dry tongue, "Crek, crek," and the tree that had thought itself a permanent shape in the world began to imagine falling. At last the work's voice rose to its ending. The long fibers tore, the great body leaned, the branches took up a shiver and passed it from tip to tip. The ground felt the change before the eyes had admitted it. Then the tree came down with a sound that was both one sound and many, a groan, a rush of leaves, a slap of boughs against earth, a final thunk and sigh. Dust rose and drifted. Birds that had nested within rose too, chattering their complaints. When the air cleared, the giant lay at peace on the ground. Spider wiped his brow. He looked at the servant kindly. "You saw," he said, spreading his hands as if to offer the sight back to the boy. "I used only the wooden axe." The servant nodded. He had kept watch. He had done his duty as he understood it. Together they went to the king. Spider carried the wooden axe, and the servant carried his testimony. The king's word was plain. The tree had been felled under the stated condition. The reward was due. So Spider received an elephant, great, slow, and valuable, a walking storehouse of strength. With many thanks and a heart swollen with triumph, Spider set out for home, leading his prize. The road that had been long with labor was now sweet with reward. People came out to see. Their eyes widened at the sight of the elephant with little Spider at its head, and their chatter followed like a flock of small bright birds. But sweetness has its shadows, and as Spider walked, a new thought wandered into him and made itself comfortable. "Shall I take this animal home?" he wondered. "If I do, I must share it. My family will gather with their mouths and their bowls, and we shall be many around one beast. No, better to hide it in the bush and eat it slowly, at my leisure. Then the whole of it will be mine." That, decided, another thought arrived to sit beside it. "What, though, shall I carry home now for the children's dinner? Something small will do, something to keep their minds quiet while I enjoy the larger meat in secret." He looked around for such a thing and saw, a little distance off, a tiny wren perched upon a twig. The bird's body was hardly more than a thumb of feathers. It flicked its tail and tilted its head as if weighing its own lightness. "Exactly what I want," Spider said to himself, and he smiled the smile of a man who believes he can hold two plans in one hand. He tied the elephant's rope to a tree at the path's edge, a firm knot on a firm trunk, and turned toward the wren. "You stay," he may have whispered to the heavy beast, as if words could persuade a creature that size to wait upon a spider's pleasure. Spider went softly. He knew how to move when he wanted to move unseen. A foot here, a foot there, a stillness, then a glide. The wren saw him and hopped to the next twig. Spider drew closer. The wren flew to a bush a few steps away, then to the tip of a low branch, then to another. It was not afraid exactly, it was simply itself, quick, hard to hold with the eye, made for the little journeys that always stay just out of reach. Spider followed. He was entirely intent upon the small tail flick, the soft brown back, the beak sharp as a thorn. He thought of his children and the neat sufficiency of a little bird cooked on a small fire. He thought of the elephant hidden and safe behind him, tied just as securely as his cleverness could tie it. The wren shifted again. Spider made a quick snatch and felt nothing but air in his hand. He tried once more, and once more the bird, with a soft whir, stitched the space between two bushes and landed where he was not. The small chase grew longer than Spider expected. What is tiny can spread out into time. The brush whispered with the passing of the wren and the passing of Spider after it. Leaves nodded and lifted and settled again. At last, Spider stood still, breathing a little hard, and decided that the family could go without their dinner this once. "Well then," he said under his breath, "I shall return to my elephant." He turned back, stepping lightly through his own fresh bends in the grass. The tree to which he had tied the rope stood just where he had left it. The rope hung just as he had tied it. The knot looked as if it still remembered the shape of his clever hands. But the rope's far end lay empty on the ground. The elephant was gone. Spider looked up and down the path as if a creature that size might be hiding behind a leaf. The earth bore its prints, but the prints went outward and away into the bush, and then into a patch of ground too hard to read. The air held no hint of where such a large body had gone. The silence that followed felt heavy in his mouth. Spider said little, for there are not many words that can repair a bargain so foolishly made with oneself. He sat in the evening quiet and heard the silence of empty bowls, while the children lay down without supper. And so it was that cunning that brought him the elephant, but greed and restlessness left him with nothing. To lose an elephant for the sake of a wren is, indeed, a very foolish thing to do. Story 9. Kwofi and the Gods. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. In the quiet heart of the land, where mornings rose pale and gold across the thatched roofs, there lived a boy named Kwofi. He was the first son of his father's house, tall, clear-eyed, and quiet of voice. But his mother had died when he was small, and his father, after marrying again, left the boy in the care of his stepmother. Time moved softly, as it always does, and the stepmother bore children of her own. Kwofi grew straight and strong. He learned the paths of the forest and the rhythms of the river. His father had gone to the ancestors, so the work of providing fell to him. He fished by dawn, hunted by dusk, and came home with his shoulders lined by sunlight and dust. He brought back meat and fish and all that could keep a household full. Yet, though the pot was filled by his hands, he was never given his share. When the evening meal was set out, the stepmother served her own children first, filling their bowls with rich soup and good meat. Then she would sigh and look down into the pot, shaking her head. "Oh, my son Kwofi," she would say, "there is none left for you. You must go and fetch yourself a pawpaw from the field." And so, night after night, while the others ate and laughed and clattered their bowls, Kwofi would walk the darkening path toward the pawpaw grove. There, beneath the wide leaves, he would take a fruit from the tree, eat it in silence, and watch the fireflies drift through the fields like slow-falling stars. Days became seasons. Each evening brought the same words. "There is none left for you." He never quarreled, never complained. His hands continued to feed the house that forgot him. His silence was deep, but not without feeling. It was the silence of one who learns early that patience has its own voice. Then one night, as the air was heavy with the smell of stew and the sky dimmed toward rain, Kwofi's stepmother spoke the familiar line again. "Oh, my son Kwofi, there is none left for you. You must go and fetch yourself a pawpaw." He stood and went as before. But before he reached the field, a sound rose through the village like a strange wind. It was not singing, not talking, it was the voice of a god. The god entered the village with a great bag slung across his shoulder. The people came out to see him, for the gods do not visit without reason. His eyes shone like stormlight, and his voice filled the air as he called, "Oh, my villagers! I come with a bag of death for you." The villagers gathered close, trembling but unable to turn away. The god opened the bag and began to give from it. None could see what he drew forth, but all who received it fell silent, one by one, as if sleep had taken them in its deepest form. He went from person to person, and the air grew stiller as he passed. When he reached Kwofi, who had come running from the pawpaw field, he looked at the boy a long time. Then he spoke, his voice clear and measured. "Oh, my son Kwofi, there was never sufficient meat for you, neither is there any death." The words hung in the air like a calm that cannot be shaken. The god turned and went his way, the bag of death swaying lightly at his side. When the silence settled, Kwofi looked around and saw that the village had gone utterly still. His stepmother, her children, the neighbors, all lay where they had stood. The fires still burned, the bowls still steamed, but no hand lifted them. He stood there as the wind moved through the trees, soft and slow, like breath leaving the world. Then, slowly, the boy walked back toward the house that had so often sent him away. From that day, Kwofi lived alone. But he was not lonely. He planted the fields, fished the rivers, and tended the quiet that the god had left behind. The land, it is said, grew gentle around him. No quarrel rose there, and no hunger was left unheeded. He reigned in peace, quietly and wisely, as though the god's words had become the shape of his days. And when people tell the story by firelight, they let it end in stillness, remembering that kindness may be slow in coming, but when it does, it lasts. Story 10. How wisdom became the property of the human race. From Ashanti in modern Ghana, told by R.S. Rattray in Ashanti Proverbs and Folktales, 1916. Long ago, when the world was still soft and the sky hung low enough for voices to reach it, there lived Ananse, the spider. His web of cunning stretched from tree to tree, and every creature in the Ashanti lands knew his name. In those days, wisdom did not belong to humankind. It was gathered and kept in a single vessel, a great earthen pot that held every secret of living, every skill, every clear thought the world had ever known. That pot belonged to Nyame, the sky god. It hung high above the earth, where no wind or hand could touch it. Inside was the knowing of how to plant and to weave, how to speak rightly, how to heal, and how to live with understanding. Below, on the earth, people walked in half-light, clever enough to survive but not yet wise enough to understand the heart of things. Ananse, ever curious, looked up and said to himself, "If only I could hold that pot, I would be the wisest of all. All creatures would come to me for counsel, and my name would never be forgotten." So he spun a silken thread as fine as thought itself and climbed to the sky god's dwelling. There he bowed low before Nyame and spoke with all humility. "Great Lord," he said, "give me the pot of wisdom. Let me keep it safe for you upon the earth." Nyame, amused by the small creature's boldness, granted the request. He lowered the pot into Ananse's waiting hands, saying only, "Guard it well." The spider thanked him and carried the heavy thing down from the sky. Its round clay sides pressed cool against his body, and inside it he could hear the faint murmur of all the world's knowing. When he reached the earth, Ananse sat and peered into the pot. The light within shimmered like ripples upon deep water. "Ah," he whispered, "now I alone shall be wise. I will hide this where no one can find it. Then all who wish for counsel must come to me." He thought long about where to place it. He could bury it, but the rains might uncover it. He could hide it in his house, but others might stumble upon it. At last he said, "I shall tie it to myself and climb the tallest tree. There, at the top, I will hide it beyond the reach of all." He fetched a long vine and wound it around the pot and around his small frame until it hung against his front like a heavy drum. Then he began to climb. The bark was rough, the branches high, and the pot swung awkwardly as he moved. Each step was hindered by its weight, the rim bumped against him, the vines cut tight against his body. Down below, his young son stood watching. Some say it was Ntikuma. The boy looked up and saw his father struggling, the pot sliding and knocking at every motion. At last he called out, "Father, why do you tie the pot in front of you? Would it not be easier to carry it upon your back?" Ananse stopped midway up the trunk. The air seemed to still around him. He looked down through the branches at his son and said, "What is that you say?" "Upon your back, father," the boy repeated. "Then you could climb more easily." For a moment, Ananse hung there, caught between pride and shame. He who believed himself the guardian of all wisdom had been corrected by a child. All the knowledge of the world pressed against his chest, yet one small voice below had pierced it with a single thought. He let out a sigh that was half laughter, half anger. "So, even with all the wisdom in my hands, a child still thinks better than I." In his frustration he loosened the vines and, without another word, hurled the pot to the ground. It fell through the air and broke with a sound like thunder made of clay. The pot shattered into 1,000 shining fragments, and from each piece a little of its wisdom escaped. The light within rose and scattered, carried away by wind and rain, by bird and river. It drifted across the world, settling wherever it found room, upon mountains, within seashells, in the minds of women and men and children. Ananse climbed down slowly. The air was full of a strange hush, as though the world itself were listening. His son stood beside him, looking at the broken shards. "Well," said Ananse at last, "now wisdom no longer belongs to one alone. It has gone to everyone, as it seems it was meant to do." The spider brushed the dust from his legs and sat beneath the tree. Around him the sunlight dimmed, and the small sounds of the forest returned. A breeze stirred the leaves, carrying faint whispers of the wisdom still drifting through the air. And so it is, they say, that no person holds all understanding. Each of us carries only a little piece, some more, some less, but together we make the world wise. As the evening settles over the Ashanti land, the old storytellers still end this tale with a soft smile and the same quiet thought. That even Ananse, clever as he was, had to learn that wisdom shared is wisdom complete. Story 11. How the Tortoise Got Its Shell. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. Long ago, when the rain still spoke to the earth like an old friend and every festival was a promise of laughter and song, the chief Mori, whom many called the ruler of the world, decided to hold a great yam feast. It was to be a gathering unlike any other, filled with music and the scent of roasted food and the bright colors of dance. Messengers went forth across the land, summoning people from every town and village. All were invited to share in the joy of the harvest. When the day of Feeder, Friday, arrived, Mori sent his servants across the countryside to gather what was needed for the celebration. Some went for sheep and cows, others for goats and fruits and all manner of things good to eat. Among them was Mr. Klo, the tortoise. But in those times, he was not the slow, creeping creature we know today. He stood upright, tall and strong, a handsome traveler with quick feet and a proud heart. Mori commanded him to fetch palm wine from the fields of Kwofi the chicken, and Klo set out at once, confident in his strength and swiftness. The path wound between groves of palm and bush, warm with the hum of insects and the quiet rustle of leaves. In no time, Klo reached Kwofi's place. The chicken was just finishing his breakfast when Klo arrived. They greeted one another politely, as travelers should, and Kwofi asked, "Why have you come to my field so early, my friend?" "I come on behalf of His Majesty, Mori," said Klo. "He has sent me to buy palm wine for the festival." Kwofi set down his calabash and replied, "Whether Mori is ruler of the world or not, no one may buy my wine with money. If you truly want it, you must fight me for it." Should you win, the wine and the palm trees are yours." Kwo's eyes brightened at the challenge. He was known for his strength, and Kwofi too was fierce. The two faced one another under the brightening sky. They fought long and hard, dust rising around them, wings and limbs flashing, neither yielding for hours. But at last, Kwo prevailed. He bound Kwofi securely and left him lying there while he claimed his prize. He took a large earthen pot and filled it to the brim with the sweet palm wine. Still there was more, so much that his vessel could not hold it all. Foolishly pleased with himself, Kwo decided to drink the rest. The warm sweetness made him drowsy, but he was too proud to stop. When he had finished, he gathered up the palm trees, laid them upon his back, and began his journey home, carrying the pot of wine before him. The day grew heavy with heat, and soon the sky began to change. Clouds rolled over the hills, and with a low rumble, the rain came, a wild, relentless rain that blurred the path before him. The earth turned to slippery red clay beneath his feet, and every step became a struggle. The palm trees soaked up water and grew heavier, the pot shifted in his grasp, the ropes cut into his shoulders. The sweet wine he had drunk dulled his legs and slowed his breath. Still he trudged on, through wind and downpour, until at last, near nightfall, he reached Mori's palace. But the great gates were shut and locked. The feast had already begun. The chief, thinking everyone was safely inside, had ordered the gates closed against the storm. Inside, music filled the air. The drums beat deep and steady, the singers raised their voices, dancers stamped their feet in time. The feast was alive with joy, and the thunder outside only added to its rhythm. No one heard the sound of Kwo's knocking at the gate, a dull, muffled thud swallowed by the rain. Outside, Kwo stood alone in the storm. The water ran in sheets down his face and arms. The pot of wine slipped against his chest, the palm trees sagged across his back. He tried again and again to call out, but the wind answered louder. At last, the weight and the weariness overcame him, and he sank to his knees before the gate. The rain fell without mercy. The storm did not end quickly. It rained for nearly 2 months, day and night, without rest. Those inside the palace stayed where they were, singing and dancing through the long storm, while Kwo lay outside, silent beneath his load. The days blurred together, the earth softened and then hardened again, and the mound before the gate grew into part of the ground itself. When at last the rain ceased and the palace doors were opened, the people were astonished. Before the gate where the path should have been lay a great heap of palm and mud. They fetched spades and began to clear it away. They dug and shoveled, until, deep beneath the mound, they uncovered Kwo, the tortoise. His earthen pot had pressed upon him through all those long days, and the clay and dust had baked into a hard covering on his back. They carried him inside at once. The musicians fell silent, the drums quieted, and Mori himself came forward. By the use of many powerful medicines, Kwo was restored to life. His breath returned, his eyes opened. But something in him had changed forever. The weight of the pot and the long, crushing rain had left their mark. From that day, he could no longer stand upright. The tall traveler who once strode swiftly across the land became a creature of the ground, moving slowly and steadily, his back covered by the hard shell that had formed there. And so, it is said, that is how the tortoise came to wear his shell. When you see him walking quietly across a path or resting in the shade after rain, you can still trace the shape of that old pot in the curve of his back, a reminder of pride, of endurance, and of how even the strong must sometimes bow beneath the weight of their own making. Story 12. Farmer Mybrow and the Fairies. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. In the time when morning smoke still rose straight into a quiet sky, a farmer named Mybrow walked the edge of the great forest, searching for a place to plant new life. He wished for a patch of good soil to grow corn and yams, and after long wandering he found one, a fine stretch of land lying close to the forest's green shadow. The trees there whispered softly to one another, their leaves glimmering like coins in the sun. It was peaceful ground, though everyone knew the forest beyond was home to fairies, beings who lived unseen but not unheard. Mybrow, who feared no spirit, set to work at once. He sharpened his great knife till it caught the light and stepped forward to cut the first bush. No sooner had the blade touched a stem than a voice rose from the hush around him. "Who is there, cutting down the bushes?" He froze, startled. The voice came again, gentle and curious. "Who is there, cutting down the bushes?" Then Mybrow realized it must be one of the fairies. "It is I, Mybrow," he answered, steadying his voice, "come to prepare a field." There was silence for a breath, and then the sound of laughter, like wind moving through reeds. "Let us all help Farmer Mybrow to cut down the bushes," said another voice. At once the forest stirred. The branches trembled, and the bushes fell in swift succession, though Mybrow's knife barely moved. Before long the wide patch of land lay bare, open to the sunlight. Mybrow, amazed, lowered his blade. The fairies had cleared the place for him in less time than it would take to tell the tale. He bowed his head in gratitude and whispered a thank you into the air. But as he walked home that evening, he resolved to keep the secret of the field even from his wife. Blessings, he thought, stay longest when kept quiet. When January came and the air grew sharp and bright, it was time to burn the dry bush. Mybrow took fire to the field one afternoon, hoping for the fairies' help again. As he passed the tall trees, he struck a trunk lightly with the back of his knife. "Who is there, striking the stumps?" "It is I, Mybrow," he replied, smiling. "I have come to burn down the bush. Let us help Farmer Mybrow to burn down the bush." A spark leapt, and the dried grass caught like paper. Fire danced swiftly through the field, red tongues licking up the last of the brush. By sunset the ground lay smooth and clean, smoke curling lazily into the blue. The next day he came again to chop up the stumps. He had only just raised his axe when he heard the same bright voices. "Who is there, cutting the stumps?" "It is I, Mybrow, come to clear the field for digging." And again the unseen helpers replied, "Let us all help Farmer Mybrow." So it went each day. The fairies worked beside him, digging, planting, smoothing, sowing. In a short time the field was divided neatly, maize on one side, yams on the other. Both grew tall and strong. Mybrow often visited, his heart swelling with pride. He kept the place secret still, believing silence would guard his good fortune. One morning, while the corn and yams were still green and full of milk, Mybrow's wife came to him. "My husband," she said softly, "you go often to your fine field, but I have never seen it. Tell me where it lies, that I may fetch firewood from there." At first he refused. "No, wife. It is far, and there is no need." But she was persistent, her voice gentle and her eyes unrelenting. At last he sighed and told her, but only after she had promised one thing. "If you go there," he said, "and you hear anyone speak to you, do not answer. Whatever happens, keep silent." She nodded earnestly. "I will not speak," she promised. The next morning she set out. Dew silvered the path, and the forest smelled of fresh earth and sap. When she reached the clearing, she stood in wonder. Never had she seen such a field, maize gleaming in long rows, yam leaves spreading wide like green umbrellas. She walked among them, marveling. The maize looked so sweet and milky that she thought, just one ear. No one will know. She plucked it. Instantly a voice drifted from the air. "Who is there, breaking the corn?" Startled, she forgot her husband's warning. "Who dares ask me such a question?" she cried. All grew still. She turned to the yam patch, still muttering to herself, and dug one up. Again came the voice. "Who is there, picking the yams?" She answered angrily, "It is I, Mybrow's wife. This is my husband's field, and I have a right to pick." Then the forest burst with sound, tiny feet, laughter, a rustling like rain. "Let us all help Mybrow's wife to pluck her corn and yams," the fairies shouted. Before she could move, they swarmed the field. Small unseen hands tore through the rows, pulling down corn, ripping out yams, until every stalk lay broken and trampled. The air filled with the scent of crushed green. The woman watched helplessly as her husband's fine crop was ruined. When the noise faded, she wept, but the fairies were gone. She walked home slowly, her head bowed. When Mybrow asked about her day, she said nothing. Shame sealed her tongue. At dawn the next morning, Farmer Mybrow went to see his field, whistling as he walked. He dreamed of the harvest to come, the baskets heavy with grain, the praise of his neighbors. But when he reached the clearing, his steps faltered. The field lay in ruin. The maize was broken, the yams lay torn from the earth, the ground itself looked wounded. He stood for a long time, staring in silence. The forest around him gave no sound, not even a bird. He knew at once what had happened. The fairies had come, and his wife had spoken. He bowed his head. The gift he had been given so freely was gone, undone by a single careless word. He turned away slowly and walked home through the quiet trees. Behind him, the forest seemed to sigh, and the wind moved softly through the leaves as though it, too, remembered what had been lost. From that day, they say, the fairies were never again so quick to help a man. And sometimes, in the cool hush before evening, when the fields lie still and the shadows grow long, the old ones tell this story in a low voice, to remind us that promises, once broken, fade like light at dusk. Story 13. The Tale of the Princess Elephant. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. In a quiet village of red earth and waving grass, an old woman lived with her 3 sons. She was frail now, her hair white as river foam, but her heart was full of light. Her sons loved her dearly and wished to bring her happiness in her last years. One evening, as the sun sank behind the trees, they spoke together about how they might honor her. The eldest said, "When you are gone, mother, I will carve for you a fine sepulchre of stone, that all who pass may know you were loved." The second promised, "I will make a coffin of the best wood, polished and shining, fit for a queen." But the youngest, whose eyes were bright with daring, whispered, "And I will bring the tail of the Princess Elephant, and place it in the coffin beside you." His brothers stared at him in disbelief, for this was a vow beyond any ordinary gift. Yet their mother smiled, and in her heart she was pleased. Soon after, her spirit left the world of men, and her 3 sons mourned her with all their hearts. When the days of mourning were over, the youngest gathered his things and began his journey. He had made a promise, and promises, once spoken, must be kept. He traveled for many days and nights, through fields that shimmered with heat by day and breathed cool mist by night. He crossed wide rivers whose waters whispered against the stones, and passed through forests that murmured like distant seas. His feet ached, but he did not turn back. At last, after 3 weeks, he reached a small, hidden village. There, he met an old woman who looked at him in astonishment. "No human has ever come here," she said. "How did you find this place?" He bowed and told her of his quest, to bring back the tail of the Princess Elephant for his mother's coffin. The old woman's face softened. "This is the home of all elephants," she told him. "Every night they return here to rest. The princess sleeps in the eastern corner, but be warned, if they see you, they will kill you." He begged her to hide him. After a long pause, she nodded and led him to a great pile of firewood. She hollowed a space within it and whispered, "When night falls, and they sleep, walk boldly, do not creep. Go to the eastern corner, cut the tail, and return. If you move too softly, they will hear you and wake." He thanked her and waited, heart steady but fearful. As dusk deepened, the ground began to tremble. A low rumble filled the air. The elephants were returning. Their great shapes moved between the trees, dust rising like mist around their feet. When they entered the village, one sniffed the air. "I smell a human being," he said. The old woman came out and laughed softly. "You smell only the wind," she said. "Come, your supper is ready." The elephants ate, and when their bellies were full, they lay down to sleep. Their breathing filled the night like the rhythm of waves. The young man waited until the moon was high. Then he slipped from his hiding place. The earth was cool beneath his feet. He walked boldly, as he had been told, through the sleeping giants. At last he reached the eastern corner, where the Princess Elephant lay, her skin smooth and pale in the moonlight. He lifted his knife and, in one swift motion, cut off the tip of her tail. Without a sound, he turned and walked back, steady and sure. Moments later, he was gone into the forest, the precious tail wrapped in cloth. At dawn, one elephant stirred. "I dreamed the princess's tail was stolen," he said. The others laughed and beat him for foolish talk. But another spoke, I dreamed the same, and he too was struck. Then the oldest among them said, let us see if the dream is true. They went to the princess and woke her. When she saw her tail was gone, her cry echoed through the trees. Furious, she led the herd in pursuit. Far ahead, the young man ran, his breath coming fast. The earth quaked beneath him with their thunderous chase. In fear he cried to the small juju hidden in his hair, "Oh my juju, Dippor, what shall I do?" The charm whispered, "Throw the branch you carry over your shoulder." He did so, and the branch grew instantly into a mighty tree, so tall its crown touched the clouds. The elephant stopped to tear it down and eat the bark, and in that time the young man fled farther. But before long they were on his trail again. "Oh my juju, Dippor," he called. "What shall I do?" "Throw the corn-cob behind you," said the juju. He obeyed, and the cob grew into a vast field of maize, stretching to the horizon. The elephants stopped to feed, trampling and eating until the field was bare. By then the young man had reached home. When the elephants came to the edge of the village, they halted. They could not enter. All turned back, except one. The princess elephant stood still. Her eyes were fierce. "I will not return," she said. "Not until I have punished the one who dared to shame me." That evening, a beautiful maiden appeared on the road. She carried a shining calabash symbol, and her face glowed with grace and mystery. The villagers gathered, marveling at her beauty. She lifted the symbol and declared, "Let it be known that whoever can strike this symbol with an arrow shall have me for his wife." The young men tried, one after another, and all failed. An old man watching said, "If only Kwofi, the one who cut the princess elephant's tail, were here. He could strike it." The maiden smiled. "Then Kwofi is the man I will marry," she said, "whether he hits the symbol or not." Messengers ran to fetch him from his field. When he heard, he frowned. He suspected a trap, but he came. He drew his bow, aimed, and let the arrow fly. It struck the very center of the symbol, ringing out clear as silver. The people cheered. The maiden took his hand, and before nightfall they were married. But when the songs faded and the moon rose, she watched him with eyes that glimmered strangely. While Kwofi slept, she changed her shape. Her skin thickened, her face stretched long, her hands became tusks. She was once again the princess elephant. She raised her foot to crush him. But Kwofi woke in time and cried, "Oh my juju Dippor, save me." The juju answered, and he turned into a grass mat lying on the bed. The elephant searched but found only the mat beneath her. At dawn she asked, "Where were you last night?" "When you became an elephant," he said, "I was the mat you lay upon." In anger she gathered the mats and burned them all. The next night she tried again. When she turned into an elephant and reached for him, Kwofi called out once more, "Oh my juju Dippor, save me." The juju turned him into a needle, small and bright, hidden among the bedding. When morning came, she asked again where he had been, and he told her. Her fury deepened. The next day, when he went to plow his field, she brought him food. After he ate, she said softly, "Lay your head in my lap and sleep." He forgot his fear and did so. While he slept, she reached into his hair, found the tiny juju, and threw it into the fire she had prepared. The flames leapt high. Kwofi woke to see her once more in her elephant form. Terrified, he cried, "Oh my Juju de poor! What shall I do?" From the fire came a faint voice, "I am burning, I am burning, I am burning." He cried again for help, and the voice whispered, "Lift your arms as if you were flying." He raised them, and at once his arms became wings, his body light as air. He rose above the smoke, a hawk, circling over the fire. Below him the princess elephant roared, but she could not reach him. And that, they say, is why hawks still fly through the smoke of village fires. They are Kwesi's children, still searching for their lost Juju de poor, who once saved their ancestor from harm. And sometimes, at evening, when the air grows soft and the smoke drifts upward in thin grey ribbons, the elders tell this tale. Their voices fall to a hush, and they say that courage and gratitude, when carried in the heart, can lift even a man above his fears. Story 14. King Chameleon and the Animals. From the Gold Coast in modern Ghana, told by Barker and Sinclair in West African Folktales, 1917. Long ago, before there were kingdoms or crowns, when the world was still young and all creatures shared the same wind, the animals lived together in easy friendship. They wandered where they pleased, rested when they wished, and ate as the forest provided. For a time, all was well. But without anyone to lead or judge them, selfishness crept quietly into their lives. The strong took what they wanted, the weak grew fearful, and soon quarrels stirred like dust beneath their feet. One evening, they gathered upon the open plain to speak of it. They agreed that they needed a ruler, someone to keep peace among them and settle their disputes. But who should it be? The lion was the first to be named. He tossed his golden mane proudly, but the goats and deer cried out at once, trembling. "No," they said. "He is too fierce. If he rules, none of us will live to see the morning." Then the wolf was suggested, but the sheep and their kin shook their heads. "He is our enemy," they whispered. "We will never rest beneath his rule." So they argued deep into the night, each fearful of another, until the tortoise, slow, steady, and wise, spoke from where he was sitting. "Since we cannot agree," he said, "let the gods decide. 2 miles from here, beneath the oldest tree of the forest, stands a sacred stool. We shall race for it. Whoever reaches the stool first and sits upon it will be king." The others murmured their approval. It seemed fair. The stool of the gods would choose. When dawn broke, the plain shimmered beneath a silver mist. The grass bowed with dew, and the air was bright with the sound of hooves and paws preparing for the race. From the mighty elephant to the tiny mouse, every creature gathered at the starting place. The signal was given, and they sprang forward in a rush of motion, dust flying, wings beating, hearts pounding. The hare, swift and sure, darted ahead, leaving the rest far behind. The ground blurred beneath him. The stool of the gods shone in the morning light, carved smooth by time. He smiled, already tasting victory. But just as he leapt to take his seat, a quiet voice rose from the stool itself. "Take care, Mr. Hare. Take care, I was here first." The hare stopped, startled. There, upon the stool, was the chameleon. No one had seen him during the race, for he had clung to the hare's tail and changed his color to match his fur. Hidden and unnoticed, he had held fast until this moment. Now, with a slow, graceful movement, he stepped forward, turned a deep shade of green, and settled himself upon the sacred stool. The hare's heart thumped with anger. He stamped his feet, ready to shout, but before he could speak, the others arrived, breathless and dusty from the race. They saw the chameleon sitting calmly on the stool and remembered the rule they had agreed upon. The first to reach and sit would be king. And so, though none were pleased, they bowed low before King Chameleon. The new king lifted his head proudly, but the eyes that faced him were cold. The lion growled beneath his breath, the hare glared, the gazelle turned away. Even the tortoise, who had spoken so wisely, said nothing at all. When the meeting ended, the animals scattered back into the forest, each taking a different path. Soon the clearing lay silent. Chameleon sat upon the stool, his colors shifting slowly from gold to brown to green. He waited for his subjects to return, but none came. He called after them, his voice small and trembling. Only the wind answered him. Ashamed and lonely, the chameleon climbed to the top of a tall tree on a distant mountain. He built his home there, high above the earth, where the air was thin and the stars were close. And even now, when the forest is quiet and the night is still, you may hear him calling softly into the darkness, his voice faint as wind in the leaves. And the elders say that his call is a reminder, drifting across the sleeping world, that a king without subjects is no king at all. And so, dear dreamer, the drums fall silent, and the fire softens to ash. From clever webs and forest paths, from river spirits to talking yams, we have wandered together through the timeless tales of Ghana, the land where gods once walked, and stories still breathe beneath the trees. These legends, passed from tongue to flame, from elder to child, carry laughter, wisdom, and the quiet heartbeat of memory. If your eyes grow heavy, may your dreams drift gently beneath the wide African sky. If you listen while you work or study, may the rhythm of words keep you company and at peace. Thank you for spending this time with Whispered Legends. If these stories brought you calm, consider subscribing. Or leave a kind word below to let the circle continue. Until next time, may your night be gentle, and your spirit light as the echo of a drum beneath the moon.